Sorry, but my boy Shakespeare just doesn't hit, you know? Hi besties, welcome. Today, I hope your day feels like when you nail your eyeliner on the first try and you don't have to wipe it off and redo it. That might be unattainable. Maybe I set the bar too high. I don't know. A long time ago, I remember watching Kat from Paperback Dreams do this. She did it and I thought it was hilarious. And so I'm stealing the idea. Basically, she went on Goodreads and went to all of her favorite books and then read the negative reviews of those books. That's what I'm gonna be doing. I've been talking about my favorite books a lot recently on the channel, so I feel like it's a good time to just go ahead and do it and like get mad at random people I don't know for not liking the same books I like, as though they're not allowed to have their own opinions. Let's start with The Song of Achilles. I just typed in the Dong of Achilles. I guess that works too. Let's see. I'm scared. They said the characters were horrendous. If I wanted to read about the most useless, passive, and boring narrator being in love with this attractive golden god dude with no personality, and when he does have one, he just turns into a selfish prick, I would reread Twilight. Can Patroclus be any more of a Bella? I'm gonna cry. I shouldn't have decided to do this. I cannot believe someone is comparing Patroclus to Bella Swan. I need a moment. I understand why people think he's passive, but also he's like not afforded a lot of agency in the book because of his station. So it's not totally on him, but also he's kind of like a Nick Carraway figure where he's like your narrator and your eyes into the world of Achilles. The writing was mediocre. Madeline, I'm so sorry. You have a right to think that it was boring, but to say the writing is mediocre, that is crazy to me. Holy crud. Of the story, I can't say much because nothing happens. It's about a war. Stuff does happen. I have a feeling that a lot of these are going to be saying they're boring and nothing happened because I like books that are boring in which nothing happens. This one has spoilers, so I'll put a little spoiler thing at the bottom and just like go to where it's gone if you don't want spoilers for The Song of Achilles. She said, the only reason I didn't DNF was because I wanted to watch them die, suffering, and begging for death. Somebody saying that about my babies is a little too much. I think I stuck my mascara into my eyeball because my eye is like watering profusely. Either that or I'm just really upset about this slander. Patroclus is portrayed as a whiny little bitch incapable of yielding a spear. He is low-key a whiny little bitch though. I still love him. We're all whiny little bitches at times. Are we not? Okay, I gotta switch to a new book. This is hurting me too much. Normal People by Sally Rooney. Let's go to the 1-star reviews. Some of my perplexity with Normal People is that I just couldn't relate to the 20-something, highly educated, politically aware, and cynical young adults that populate this novel. I could. I'm not sure how reflective these voices are of young Irish making their way in the world, but as presented here, I found them exasperating to listen to and not particularly nuanced. It's crazy to me that anyone could say that this book wasn't nuanced. If anything, it's nuanced. You can call it boring, but it's nuanced. Whoever was responsible for the marketing of this book deserves a raise because they managed to make 400,000 plus people read this incredibly boring story. Maybe it's one of those books where you kind of have to relate to and empathize with the characters to fully get what it's doing. I don't know. I related to them a lot. I am either going to need new eyes or eye sockets because for the entire 266 pages, I could not stop rolling my eyes. Grown-ass individuals refusing to open their mouths and say exactly what they're thinking, feeling, or asking. It was frustrating, so frustrating. I get that. It was frustrating sometimes that they wouldn't communicate, but that's part of the experience, and also they're so young. We live in a world where it has become increasingly difficult to communicate while making eye contact with people because we communicate only on screens and things. So I actually think a lot of it was quite accurate to how young relationships are and how like afraid young people are to feel as deeply as these two characters were feeling, which is something that in my opinion makes the book so interesting. Let's move on. Let's look at the Goldfinch. I have like a fierce love for this book. I have to wonder for whom Tart thinks she's writing. Does she really imagine that intelligent adult readers are going to be enthralled with hundreds of pages of a pair of burned out druggy teenagers who spend their time smoking weed, swilling vodka, and dining on packets of sugar? Well, perhaps they will. The book is on the New York Times bestseller list. I love that she just disproved her own point. The comparisons to Dickens are particularly inappropriate. Dickens wrote about orphans and other unfortunates who are on the receiving end of undeserved bad luck. Literally Theo in the Goldfinch. I'm confused. Where to start? There is so much wrong with this mess of a book. It is too long. It has a weak, reactive protagonist for who I felt no empathy. Theo is pitiable and unlikable, and worst of all, he does not change. I don't think that's true at all. I think he changes quite a lot. I mean, I think there's some trauma that you'll always be marked with throughout your life. I definitely think he grows. I mean, it tracks him from when he's like 10 to when he's an adult, so I think he changes. He is weak and reactive, and to me that's one of the things that makes him interesting. I don't always agree when bad reviews are about the flaws of a protagonist and saying that's why they didn't like the book. I like really flawed characters. I think they're interesting. I just think it's so interesting how differently people can react to books. Is that because of different lived life experiences? Is it because like that's, I don't know. I just think that's so interesting. This one is short and to the point. It says, beautiful writing. Don't give a fuck about the characters though. Do not read if you value any iota of your time on Earth. Ugh. Let's move on. Let's look at Pride and Prejudice. This user says, Pride and Prejudice is the most overrated book in the history of literature. That is a big statement. This review just says P to the double O-P. This user's very eloquent review of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is simply poop. If you have the balls to review one of the most renowned works in all of literature as just poop, you deserve an award. Flowery, pretentious writing does not a good story make. I understand people thinking that, but also at the time it wasn't flowery and pretentious. At the time, like that's how people spoke. So I always get frustrated when people talk about classics like Austen and Shakespeare that way and say, just because it's flowery doesn't mean it's good. You're right, but it also wasn't flowery at the time. And it was like comedy, it was satire. No one writes romance colder than Austen. I wouldn't consider the line, I was in the middle before I knew I had begun, cold, but agree to disagree. Painfully slow and dull. Nothing much happens for a good long while. The thing about Pride and Prejudice is that a lot does happen. It just seems mundane to us. But at the time, you know, somebody playing a pianoforte at a party would be equivalent to us going to see, you know, a world-bending movie and then telling our friends about it. So I think it's difficult because so many reviews of classics that are negative forget to put the classic in the lens of the time it was written, which is important. The very stimulated way that we live now wasn't possible back then, and so they found stimulation elsewhere through needlepoint and playing piano and reading books and stuff like that. And it's boring to us maybe because we have so much to occupy our time and so much to look at and do and be entertained by that we can't like comprehend a time when that wasn't the norm. Hatred is too strong an emotion to waste on this literary twilight. It's so funny to me that all of the bad reviews of these books are just comparing it to Twilight. It shows you how much people hate Twilight. I'm gonna look at the Raven Boys. Not to be dramatic, but I would die for everyone in the Raven Boys. This one says, oh wow, no, just rename this the Raven Boys, please. They are kind of boys. That's really funny. What I'm getting at is that this book has a million subplots, all equally undeveloped. You know, I get this one a little bit. I don't think this as much in the first book, but I think throughout the series I did get a little frustrated because I thought there were lots of subplots that I didn't care about nearly as much as what was going on with the main characters. And so I'll allow it. Gansey is the embodiment of unchecked privilege. Yeah, that's kind of the point though. Let's look at Little Women. This is what American women aspired to: flaccid, beribboned, personhoodless dolls, shock and outrage. The whole point of the book is that these women have aspirations and goals that are artistic and new and interesting, and that they're not just what men deem them to be. I'm confused by that. There are no actual Little Women in this book. All regular-sized women. Title is misleading. 0 out of 10. Would not read again. Let's do The Great Gatsby. Hold on, I just saw a 5-star review of The Great Gatsby that says Daisy Buchanan is a hero. I don't have room in my head to unpack that, so we're just gonna carry along. This Goodreads user says, he should have called it Desperate House Husbands. What? This is a classic Fitzgerald, the Roaring Twenties, and you. This review says, never liked this book. Page after scant page describing flippant and superficial people. Seriously? I'll settle for the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think she might have missed the point on the book. That is, actually, it's the whole point of the book. It's that they're superficial and that material things make us so. Let's do Perks of Being a Wallflower. One of them is talking about how cringe Charlie is as a character, but like he's mentally ill and dealing with crippling trauma and is afraid of his own thoughts. So let's relax on criticizing Charlie. Good God, would somebody please call the wambulance? I think that reading bad reviews of this one are especially hard for me because I think it may be by a lot of people who don't grapple with some of the things that the characters do and so can't relate or can't understand why they behave the way they do. But that is not the case for me, so I love the characters a lot. This one says, you know what I wish? I wish the whiny ass characters in Hamlet would shut up. You're not wrong. Shakespeare's contribution to the English language is irrelevant. Now you're wrong. It doesn't really matter how you feel about Shakespeare. Irrelevant is not an accurate word to use to describe his contribution to literature. He has influenced more stories than maybe any other writer. You may not like him, but he's not irrelevant. Hamlet is a whiny brat who should try shutting his mouth long enough to actually do something about his situation instead of hovering in an annoying state of indecision and self-doubt. You've reached the point of the play. Congrats. Though I know logically that he really is in a pretty awful situation. I know logically it does suck that his dad died and his uncle's marrying his mom. Still, it did get easier to bear once he started pretending to be crazy though. Somebody commented and said, I'm thinking / hoping that this review is satire? Me too, dude. This play made me wish that I had drowned in a river instead of Ophelia. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut on that one. Hamlet was so whiny. The best part was when everybody kills each other at the end. Bruh. It's true though, that is the best part. But cause it's interesting in the climax, not cause I wanted it to be over. Somebody says, I doth hate Shakespeare. Hamlet is a little bitch, end of story. I like your concise review. This is so fucking funny. This says, DNF. Hamlet and Horatio are gay as f***. Sorry, but my boy Shakespeare just doesn't hit, you know? Hamlet and Horatio are gay AF. Let's go to Much Ado, which is my favorite comedy. This one says, Much Ado About Nothing was an awful book. We live in the 21st century, not the 17th century. Thy and thou are irrelevant to my English, therefore I give this book 1 star. Shakespeare wrote some amazing tragedies, but his comedies are basically twee, glorified rom-coms written for the you've got mail and must love dogs demographic as it existed in the 17th century. Absolutely nauseating. I don't like the condescension to people who like rom-coms, because if you got a problem with rom-coms, then you have a problem with me. 1 star, in all caps, dank. Does no one check for Hero's pulse? Step 1, people. Honestly, the thing is, if Shakespeare knew how to check for somebody's pulse, most of his plays would just end in like the 3rd scene. When we're watching or reading Shakespeare, we just momentarily suspend our disbelief that a pulse is a thing that exists. 1 more Shakespeare, let's do Romeo and Juliet. You know, one of the greatest, most adapted works of all time. I'm sure it's got some haters. 1 star, Mercutio was that bitch. Mercutio is the moment. This person said, dumb bitches. True. I hate how young everyone is. I hate how stupid everyone is. I hate how they fell in love in 2 seconds. Like, babes, Are you for real? I don't get how people say this is the ultimate love story. Where? Because all I know is this is the ultimate dumbass story. My final verdict is this book is whack. Romeo's stance, whack. The way that he doesn't even like to smile, whack. Me? I'm tight as f***. Bunch of teenagers who have way too much testosterone die. That is a very, very good, like, Netflix blurb of Romeo and Juliet. This is iconic. This book fucking sucks. Romeo and Juliet kill themselves with poison and dagger. They should have killed themselves with a gun and a laser cannon. Sophie rated it 1 star. Not at all like the Taylor Swift song. Well, that's all from me today. I got a good laugh before I have to go into work, and honestly, that was the goal. Go ahead and like this video, comment down below what your favorite negative review was, or what your favorite negative review you've ever seen is if I didn't look at that book. Hit subscribe down below, turn on bell notifications so you never miss one of my videos. In case you haven't heard it today, I love you. Bye.